Good evening, and welcome to Moonlight Audiobook. I'm glad you're here, whether you're winding down, out for a quiet walk, or simply in need of a good story. Tonight, we begin one of the greatest mysteries ever written, The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie. At the center is Hercule Poirot, the brilliant Belgian detective known for his order, precision, and those famous little gray cells. So pour yourself a cup of tea, coffee, or something stronger. Let me know in the comments where in the world you are watching from. Dim the lights, settle in, and let the mystery begin. Let us start with Dr. James Shepherd. He is a man of medicine, but more than that, he is a man of habit. Each morning he rises at 7:30, walks the same route through the village, and performs his duties with quiet precision. He is not prone to exaggeration, not easily excitable. In fact, he prides himself on being a rational man, which is why the events of this story will test him more than he could ever anticipate. His companion, and equal in many ways, is his sister, Caroline Shepherd, older by a few years, unmarried, and armed with what she calls feminine intuition. She might never leave the village, but she hears everything. She reads people's expressions the way a banker reads ledgers. Her gift, or perhaps her curse, is the ability to sense things unspoken. Secrets don't survive long around Caroline, and she doesn't need evidence. A raised eyebrow, a button missing from a coat, a hesitation in tone, all these things are, to her, the footprints of truth. Their home is modest but warm. A sitting room with lace curtains, a well-stocked bookshelf, and always a pot of tea ready by the hearth. Caroline sews while Dr. Shepherd reads the newspaper. Theirs is a comfortable routine, soon to be disrupted. Now let's expand our view to the village itself. King's Abbot. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone, and has known them since childhood. There are 2 churches, 1 post office, and a single train that arrives with great ceremony at 4:10. The butcher remembers your favorite cut. The grocer offers unsolicited advice, and nothing remains private for long. It is, in short, a place where life appears simple, but rarely is. At the center of this village looms Fernley Park, home to Roger Ackroyd, a man both admired and, in quieter corners, resented. Roger Ackroyd had not inherited his wealth, but earned it. He had built his fortune in the manufacture of wagon wheels, then wisely stepped away as the automobile rose to power. He purchased Fernley Park and installed himself as the lord of the manor, a position he filled with commanding presence. But though he was generous with the church and kind to tenants, Ackroyd was not without enemies. Prideful, firm, and sometimes inflexible, he held his opinions like law. He was a man who expected loyalty, but did not always return it. He trusted few, and questioned many. Let's walk through the house now, shall we? Room by room, person by person. First, we come to Ralph Patten, Ackroyd's stepson. Ralph is a figure of fascination for the village. Tall, good-looking, and ever polite, yet beneath the charm lies an uncertainty. Rumors say he drinks too much, gambles in London, owes more than he earns. Some say Ackroyd has cut him off. Others say he's being pressured into a marriage that could steady his life. And that brings us to Miss Flora Ackroyd, the late sister's daughter. Flora is beauty and quiet dignity combined. She moves through rooms with grace, says little but listens well. The village respects her, though it watches her closely. She is said to be engaged to Ralph, but rarely are they seen together. Some wonder if her engagement is one of convenience or strategy. Then we have Geoffrey Raymond, the secretary, efficient, intelligent, and seemingly content in his role. Yet there's something about Geoffrey that raises eyebrows, a slight overeagerness, a habit of being everywhere at once. He is the one who manages Ackroyd's affairs, keeps the books, organizes the papers. A man who knows far more than he speaks. Parker, the butler, comes next. He has served the household for years, always present, never obtrusive. But if anyone in the house knows its secrets, it is Parker. He carries trays with perfect balance, but he also carries stories in his eyes, stories he will never tell, unless asked the right question. Miss Russell, the housekeeper, a woman of order. Her presence is crisp, her speech minimal. She knows every drawer, every key, every whisper behind closed doors. If something is out of place, she sees it. If something is missing, she finds it. And though she does not gossip, one suspects she knows more than most. Then there are the minor characters who float on the edges of the main cast. Major Blunt, a family friend, gruff and often silent, more at home in the woods than the drawing room. Mrs. Cecil Ackroyd, Roger's widowed sister-in-law, concerned with propriety, status, and little else. These are the people of Fernley Park. Their lives twist and overlap like ivy vines on the manor's walls. Each holds a piece of the puzzle, though they may not yet know it. But beyond them all, in a tidy little cottage behind a green hedge, lives a man who will soon walk into the heart of their world. Monsieur Hercule Poirot. At first glance, he does not seem impressive. He is short, very short, meticulously dressed, with patent leather shoes and a moustache so carefully waxed it might as well be armor. He speaks with precision. He walks with poise. He notices everything. To the villagers, he is simply the foreign gentleman. An oddity, a curiosity. But Poirot's mind is a map of detail, a fortress of logic. He has seen crimes in the grand halls of Paris, on the streets of London, in the heat of Cairo and the snow of the Alps. Why he has come to King's Abbot, no one truly knows. He tends his vegetable garden with more discipline than most generals. He speaks to no one unless necessary. But every so often, when he passes the grocer or nods to the postman, there is a glint in his eye that says, "I see more than you think." And he does. He always does. Now, let us pause. Let us take one last look at this village, these people, this quiet web of relationships and routines. For within days, someone will be dead. And one of these names, these kind, polite, familiar names, will be found guilty, not by chance, not by violence, but by choice. Chapter 2. The Last Supper at Fernley Park. It was after breakfast, on a mild September morning, that the letter arrived. A cream envelope, thick and finely pressed, bearing Roger Ackroyd's distinctive, upright handwriting. Caroline noticed it first, of course. She always notices things first. The way a letter sits on the tray, the weight of footsteps on gravel, the pause in a voice across the hedge. My sister can hear secrets in silence. She handed it to me with a look that said she already had theories forming. A note from Fernley Park, she said, stirring her tea but never taking her eyes off me. I slid open the envelope and read it aloud. My dear Shepherd, I would be most obliged if you could come to dinner tonight. There is a matter I wish to discuss with you in private. Yours sincerely, Roger Ackroyd. Caroline set her spoon down and leaned back with satisfaction. I knew it, she said. You knew what? That he would speak to someone. And you're the logical choice. It's about Mrs. Ferrars, of course. I frowned. Caroline. She told him something before she died. It's obvious. She poisoned her husband. That's what people have always believed. But someone found out, started blackmailing her. That's why she took her own life. And now Roger Ackroyd knows who did it. I sighed. You have no real evidence. She smiled. I don't need evidence. I have instinct. The rest of the day passed in its usual rhythm. A few patient visits, some paperwork, and Caroline flitting from room to room with increasing excitement, as if preparing for a storm only she could predict. As the evening drew near, I dressed carefully. The sun had dipped behind the hills, leaving a faint golden glow across the fields. The walk to Fernley Park was cool, the leaves just beginning to crisp at the edges, the first signs of autumn creeping in. The house stood as always, grand and reserved, ivy curling along its stone walls. Light glowed softly from its windows. The gardens were perfectly trimmed. The air smelled faintly of damp earth and roses. Parker, the butler, answered before I could knock, as if he'd been waiting. "Good evening, Doctor," he said. "Mr. Ackroyd is expecting you. The others are in the drawing room." "The others?" I asked. He inclined his head. "Miss Flora, Mr. Raymond, Major Blunt, and Mrs. Ackroyd are present." "Ah, so not a private audience." "Not yet." The drawing room was warm, filled with the quiet hum of polite conversation. Flora Ackroyd, Roger's niece, greeted me with a soft smile. She looked pale, her blue eyes shadowed. "Dr. Shepherd," she said, "thank you for coming." She was dressed in pale green, her fair hair pinned neatly back. There was something about her, a fragility, perhaps, that made one want to speak gently in her presence. Geoffrey Raymond, Ackroyd's young secretary, stood near the fireplace with a drink in hand. He was a tidy man, polished, intelligent, a little too smooth, perhaps. Major Blunt sat stiffly in an armchair, saying little, his posture like a man on parade. He was weathered, sunburnt, and looked as though he belonged in a tent in the Sudan more than a drawing room. Mrs. Ackroyd, the widow of Roger's brother, sat draped in shawls, offering a stream of observations to no one in particular. Roger Ackroyd himself had not yet appeared. "Is in his study," Flora explained. "He's been troubled since yesterday." There was no need to ask why. We made small talk until the dinner bell rang. We gathered at the long dining table, where silver gleamed under crystal chandeliers. Ackroyd joined us at last, heavier than usual, both in body and spirit. His face was drawn, his voice subdued. He offered greetings with politeness, but no warmth. Throughout the meal, conversation remained on safe topics: weather, travel, the local road show. But beneath the tablecloth and clinking glassware, tension threaded the room. I watched Ackroyd carefully. He barely touched his food. His eyes drifted more than they focused. Once, his hand trembled slightly as he lifted his wine glass. When the final course had passed and coffee was served, he turned to me. "Shepherd," he said quietly, "would you join me in the study?" I nodded. We left the others in the drawing room and walked down the corridor. The study was just as I remembered: deep wood panels, rich rugs, a heavy oak desk beneath a shaded lamp. Books lined the shelves, and a faint scent of cigar smoke clung to the air. He closed the door behind us and locked it with a quiet click. "I must speak plainly," he said, walking slowly to the desk. "I'm listening. She came to see me yesterday, Mrs. Ferris." I said nothing. "She was not herself," he went on. "She was tormented. She told me she had a confession to make, something she could not carry any longer." I remained silent, letting him find his way through the weight of his thoughts. "She poisoned her husband," he said at last. "That much she told me." I nodded slowly. The room felt smaller now, the air heavier. But that's not what destroyed her. She was being blackmailed. Someone knew. Someone had known for nearly a year, and had been bleeding her dry. My mouth had gone dry. "Did she say who?" "She couldn't," he said. "She was too afraid. But she promised to tell me everything, in writing." He opened a drawer and took out an envelope. "This arrived this evening. Her letter. It will tell me who it was." He held it, unsealed. "Shepherd, I wanted you to be here when I read it." Before I could respond, there was a knock at the door. Parker again. "I'm terribly sorry to interrupt, sir," he said. "A telephone call for Dr. Shepherd. It's urgent." I looked at Ackroyd. "Go on," he said. "I'll wait." I stepped into the hall and took the call in the little study extension, only to discover it was a false alarm. A nervous patient with nothing serious. I was back in 5 minutes. I knocked once. No answer. I opened the study door slowly. Ackroyd sat at the desk, his chair slightly turned. The letter was no longer in his hands. His eyes were open, but vacant. There was a dagger buried in his neck. I froze. For a full minute, I simply stood there, staring. My brain refused to accept it. Then I crossed the room and checked for a pulse, though I already knew. Roger Ackroyd was dead. Chapter 3. The Belgian steps in. Roger Ackroyd was dead. There was no mistaking it. His head slumped slightly to one side. His eyes, those shrewd, alert eyes, were now lifeless, staring into nothing. The handle of the dagger jutted grotesquely from his neck, embedded deep into the flesh just below the ear. It was a vicious blow. Fast, silent, and final. I don't remember moving at first. My instincts as a doctor told me to check his pulse, though I knew it was futile. My fingers trembled as they touched the wrist. Nothing. The skin was already beginning to chill. I stepped back, slowly. The study felt different now. Smaller, darker. The polished wood paneling seemed to close in around me. A man had been speaking here only moments ago. Now he was a body, and the letter, the one Mrs. Ferrars had sent, was gone. There had been no time for him to read it. The envelope had still been sealed when I left. It had lain on the desk, clearly in view. But now, no sign of it. Had the murderer taken it? I moved about the room carefully, scanning every surface. The desk was in order. The drawers locked. Nothing appeared disturbed. No open windows, no broken glass. The door was still shut behind me. Locked, in fact. I had closed it when I entered, and I knew Parker wouldn't have dared touch it. I turned slowly and stayed at the door, the only way in or out. Whoever had done this must have entered after I left. But how? And more importantly, when? I exited the room in a daze and returned to the hall. The house had grown quiet, too quiet. From the drawing room, I heard faint laughter. The others were still unaware. I found Parker in the corridor and spoke low. Don't alarm anyone just yet, but ask Miss Flora to step out for a word, would you? He nodded, concern crossing his otherwise impassive face. Flora appeared moments later, confusion in her eyes. Doctor, is everything all right? I'm afraid not, I said gently. Come with me, please. We walked a few paces down the corridor, far from the others. Miss Flora, I said, I'm terribly sorry to tell you. Your uncle has been found dead in his study. She stared at me, not quite understanding. Dead? She whispered. Yes. She swayed slightly. I caught her arm. No, she said, gathering herself. There must be a mistake. He was speaking with you. I know. Her voice trembled. But it was suicide, wasn't it? No, I said quietly. It was not suicide. What followed was confusion. Cries of disbelief. Gasps. The flurry of movement that follows a great and sudden shock. The household gathered, Mrs. Ackroyd moaning, Geoffrey Raymond pale and silent, Major Blunt grim and unreadable. I asked that no one enter the study. Parker was sent to telephone the police. In the meantime, I took it upon myself to examine the room again, this time more thoroughly. There were no signs of struggle, no overturned chair, no blood on the carpet beyond what pooled beneath the body. The weapon was a curiously foreign-looking dagger, decorative, with a carved hilt, like something one might display in a case. It was not a weapon of convenience. It had been brought here, and then I realized something else. The window. Though closed, the French window that opened onto the terrace was not latched. I stepped forward and unfastened it. It opened easily. Outside lay the broad terrace, and beyond it, the trimmed hedge and garden path. The gravel showed no obverse prints, but in the faint glow of the study lamp, I could see one thing clearly. The murder could have come that way. The police arrived within the hour. Inspector Davis was a practical man, stout and serious, with a manner that suggested he didn't care for theatrics. He listened carefully as I gave my account, his notebook filling with short, efficient lines. Time of death, he asked. Approximately between 10 and 10:30, I said. I left the room briefly to answer a call. When I returned, he was dead. You were the last person to see him alive. I nodded. And the letter he was about to read. Missing. Yes. He frowned. And you're certain it was sealed? Absolutely. He walked the room slowly, examining the window, then the desk, then the dagger still lodged in Ackroyd's neck. "Odd weapon," he murmured. "Not the sort you'd find lying about." "It was his," said Raymond, who had stepped forward quietly. "Part of a set on display in the curio cabinet over there. I believe it's from Morocco." Inspector Davis made a note. No signs of a break-in. No noise heard. And yet, he turned to me. "And yet the door was closed when you returned." "Yes. I believe I closed it behind me." "Locked?" "I don't recall." He nodded thoughtfully. By morning, the shock had spread across the village like a fog. King's Abbot, so full of its routines and rhythms, now held its breath. The local paper printed the story in bold type: "Prominent manufacturer found dead in country estate." And then, quietly, almost imperceptibly, another figure entered the scene. He did not arrive with flashing lights or declarations of genius. He came on foot, wearing a well-brushed hat, his moustache perfectly groomed. Monsieur Hercule Poirot. I had almost forgotten he was living among us, tucked away in a little cottage, growing marrows, keeping to himself. But now, Caroline reminded me. "I told you he hadn't retired," she said over breakfast. "You'll see. This is just the sort of thing that will bring him back." Sure enough, that afternoon, I received a knock at the surgery door. Poirot stood there, polite and precise, his eyes sharp despite the calmness of his face. "Dr. Shepherd," he said, with that delicate accent of his. "May I have a few moments?" "Of course." We sat in the consulting room. "I have heard," he said gently, "of the unfortunate death of Monsieur Ackroyd." "Yes. You were the last to see him alive." I nodded. "I would be most interested," he said, "to hear your account, if you are willing." And so I told him. Everything. The dinner, the sealed letter, the sudden call, the locked door. He listened in silence, nodding occasionally, fingers steepled. When I finished, he said only, "And the letter, you are certain it is gone?" "Yes." He leaned back. "Mon ami," he said softly, "there is much here that is curious. You will permit me, just as a little hobby, you understand, to take an interest in this case." I smiled despite myself. "Of course." He stood. "One more thing," he said. "May I visit the scene?" "Fernley Park." "Yes. I'll accompany you." "Excellent," he said. "For I believe, Doctor, that someone in that house is hiding something, and we must discover what it is, before they hide more." Chapter 4. The Man Who Noticed Everything. If the death of Roger Ackroyd had cast a pall over King's Abbot, the appearance of Hercule Poirot brought with it a quiet stir, not of gossip, but of curiosity. There was something about the little man with the waxed moustache, the gleaming shoes, and the sharp eyes that unsettled people. They could not say why, only that he seemed to see more than he let on. And he never hurried. The next morning, Poirot and I walked together up the path to Fernley Park. He moved slowly, with measured steps, his hands clasped behind his back. "You understand, Doctor," he said, "I am here only as a friend, not officially. But when a man is murdered in a locked room, well, it is impossible for me to remain indifferent." We passed through the wrought iron gates, now slightly ajar. The house loomed as before, but something had changed. It no longer felt like a place of routine and order. It felt watched. Parker met us at the door. His composure had returned overnight, but I could still see tension in the tight lines of his face. "Miss Flora is in the drawing room, sir, and Inspector Davis is upstairs, speaking with Mr. Raymond." Poirot gave a polite nod. "Later, I may speak with the family. For now, it is the study I wish to see, exactly as it was last night." Parker hesitated. "Yes, sir. It has not been touched." The study was dim and quiet, the curtains drawn against the morning light. A faint scent of cigar smoke lingered still. The heavy desk stood beneath the lamp, papers neatly arranged, and the chair where Roger Ackroyd had died had been left precisely in place. Poirot walked in without a word. He stood near the threshold and slowly rotated in a full circle, eyes scanning every inch. The carpet, the fireplace, the bookshelves, the chair, the windows. He said nothing. At last, he stepped over to the desk. "This is where he sat." "Yes," I replied. Poirot gently touched the back of the chair, then examined the desk drawer. "Locked." "Yes." He turned to me. "You see, Doctor, there is a difference between seeing and observing." Then he moved to the window. The French window. The one that opened onto the terrace and the garden beyond. It was closed but unlatched. "Yes." "Yes. And there are no signs of forced entry." "None." He stepped outside, onto the terrace, then turned back. "One could come this way, quite easily. And yet, why risk it, if the door was not locked?" I said nothing. Poirot returned to the room and faced the desk once more. "The letter," he said softly. "It was he." "Yes." He pointed to the blotting pad. "May I?" "Of course." He removed a small folding mirror from his pocket, one I had not noticed, and gently pressed it against the blotting paper. Then he tilted it toward the light. Faintly, in reverse, the words began to appear. "Cannot go on. Name is." He read them aloud in a whisper. She was naming the blackmailer. Poirot gave a small nod. "But the letter is gone." He straightened. Chapter 5. The Disappearing Heir. The morning after Poirot's visit to Fernley Park, the village of King's Abbot awoke not to the usual sounds of clattering milk pails and postman whistles, but to whispers behind drawn curtains. The murder of Roger Ackroyd had taken root in every household. At the Greythorn Arms, the landlord was overheard saying it had to be the butler. At the grocer's, Mrs. Bennet insisted it was the housekeeper, and at least 3 people swore they had seen someone jump the garden wall that very night, though the details of the intruder's hat, coat, and height changed with each telling. But in all this fog of chatter, one question loomed larger than the rest. Where was Ralph Patten? That morning, I paid another visit to Fernley Park, this time alone. Parker met me at the door again, his usual confidence dimmed by the weight of recent days. He informed me that Inspector Davis had already come and gone. I found Flora Ackroyd in the morning room. She was dressed simply, her usual elegance dulled by exhaustion. She stood by the window, arms crossed. "Still no word from Ralph," she said, turning as I entered. I shook my head. "Nothing. Nothing. Have you any idea where he might have gone?" She hesitated. "I don't. Truly. He didn't say." "You don't believe he could have?" I trailed off. Her voice hardened. "Killed Uncle Roger." "No. I won't believe it." I didn't press her. Instead, I walked with her toward the study, where Poirot was expected shortly. As we reached the doorway, we saw Geoffrey Raymond waiting inside, flipping idly through a sheaf of estate papers. "Still nothing in the papers," he said without looking up. "The police are widening the search. If Ralph Patten has vanished, he's doing a very good job of it." Flora clenched her fists. "He wouldn't run unless he was afraid of being falsely accused. Or unless he had something to hide," Raymond murmured. Poirot entered just then, as silently as a cat. He wore a smart gray suit and carried a small black notebook. "Bonjour, mademoiselle." "Monsieur," he said warmly. "I trust you are both well, considering." There were quiet nods. Poirot turned to me. "Doctor, may I trouble you to assist me today?" "Of course." He placed the notebook on the desk and opened it delicately. "I would like, if I may, to make a list. A list of everyone's movements last night. If the truth is to be found, it must be nestled somewhere among the times." Poirot always begins with what is known. With Flora's help, he built the timeline. 6:45 p.m. dinner is served. All guests present except Ralph Patten. 7:30 p.m. coffee in the drawing room. Conversation light. 8:45 p.m. Ackroyd retires to his study. 9 p.m. Dr. Shepherd, myself, arrives. 9:10 p.m. I am summoned to take a telephone call. 9:15 to 9:20 p.m. I return and discover the body. Poirot tapped a pencil on the desk. Everyone remained in the drawing room during that time. Raymond nodded. Yes, except Parker, who was in and out. Poirot looked thoughtful. And the dagger? Raymond gestured toward the cabinet. It was there earlier in the day, on display. Poirot turned to Flora. You said Ralph left the house earlier. Yes, around 3 o'clock. Alone. Yes. Did anyone see him after? Flora shook her head. Poirot smiled gently. Then we have a mystery inside a mystery. As the others dispersed, Poirot and I walked out into the garden. He moved carefully, eyes on the ground, scanning the gravel path that led from the French window of the study. There are no definite footprints, he said. But tell me, what do we know of Monsieur Ralph Patten? I shrugged. Is well liked. Charming, but irresponsible. He gambles. Drinks more than he should. Debts? I believe so. Poirot nodded. And Mr. Ackroyd supported him financially. Yes. Poirot's expression sharpened. And if Monsieur Ackroyd were to change his will, to disinherit Ralph, that would not be good news, none. I paused. Do you think he would? I think, Poirot said slowly, that something occurred in the 24 hours before his death. Something that made Roger Ackroyd feel he was in danger. He stopped by a stone bench and Saturday. Doctor, he said, do you believe in psychology? I try to believe in evidence. Bon, he said. Then you will understand this. People often lie with words, but rarely with action. We must watch behavior. He pulled out his notebook. I would like now to speak with Parker. Parker was summoned. He arrived briskly, but his eyes were wary. Monsieur Parker, Poirot began, you were in service to Mr. Ackroyd for many years. 6, sir. You knew his habits. Yes, sir. Last night, after dinner, where were you? In and out of the dining room, sir. Clearing the coffee service. Checking the fires. You were the one who brought Dr. Shepherd the telephone message. Yes. May I see the message? There was no written note, sir. The call came through the kitchen line. Poirot's eyebrows rose. And the voice. I assumed it was Mr. Ackroyd's solicitor. He often called at that hour. But you do not know who it was? No, sir. Poirot was silent for a moment. One more thing, he said gently. Did you ever see Mr. Ralph Patten handle the dagger? Parker's eyes flicked. No, sir. Did he know it was there? I imagine he did. Poirot stood. Merci, Monsieur Parker. That will be all. As Parker left, I turned to Poirot. You don't believe the telephone call was real? I believe it was convenient, he said. Too convenient. He walked to the window again. Doctor, think. Why summon you from the study at precisely that moment? To lure me away, I said slowly. Exactment. And if it were a ruse? Then it was planned, said Poirot. Not by chance. And if it was planned, then the murderer was already in motion before you left that room. We returned to my home later that afternoon. Caroline, of course, was waiting. Well, she said, what has your clever little friend discovered? Poirot smiled. Ah, Mademoiselle Caroline, always sharp. Is it Ralph Patten? She asked. Poirot didn't answer directly. Instead, he folded his hands. I do not believe in jumping to conclusions. I believe in facts. And what do the facts say? Poirot's eyes glinted. That someone in Fernley Park is lying. And I intend to find out who. Chapter 6. Poirot draws a circle. For Hercule Poirot, the solution to a mystery did not begin with evidence, but with understanding people. Everyone, he once told me, has a circle of truth, and a circle of lies. My job is to see where they overlap, and what hides in the center. Chapter 6 began on a quiet morning. Too quiet. as if King's Abbot itself were holding its breath. I had just returned from my early rounds when Poirot arrived at my home, tapping precisely 3 times on the door. He entered, nodded to Caroline, who tried in vain to mask a curiosity, and asked me simply, "May we walk, Doctor?" I obliged, and soon we were pacing slowly down the village lane, the hedgerows damp with dew, the crows silent overhead. "I have thought much," Poirot said, "and when I think, I like to walk. It settles the brain. I'm ready to listen. On. Then we begin with this. The motive." I nodded. "Greed." "Not sufficient," he said. "Monsieur Ackroyd had many beneficiaries. And yet the letter is the key. It named someone, and now it is gone." I paused. "You think it was someone in the house?" Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Do you not?" "I suppose." He stopped and turned toward me. "Doctor, my friend, let me ask you this. Who had something to fear from that letter?" We both knew the answer. Ralph Patten. Exactment. But then why vanish? If he were innocent, or if he were clever, Poirot said gently, he would vanish either way. We resumed walking. "But I tell you this," he said, "there is something not natural about this case. Something unclean." Later that afternoon, Poirot requested to interview the household again, but this time, individually. Flora was first. She entered the study alone. Poirot and I sat at the desk. "Miss Flora," he said, "forgive me, but I must ask, when exactly was the last time you saw the dagger?" Her hands twitched slightly. "I don't recall noticing it. It was always there, in the case." Poirot leaned forward. "And you are quite certain that Mr. Patten left the house by 3 o'clock?" She nodded. "Yes. No one saw him after?" "No." Poirot studied her face. "You were fond of your uncle?" "Of course. But you and Ralph, you would benefit from his will." She flinched. "You think I had something to do with it?" Poirot held up a hand. "None, mademoiselle. I think you are nervous. And nervous people sometimes forget what they know." There was a long pause. Flora rose quickly. "I've told you everything." "Then that is all," Poirot said softly. "Merci." Next came Geoffrey Raymond. He entered confidently, papers under one arm. "Monsieur Raymond," Poirot said, "a simple question. Did Roger Ackroyd ever mention changing his will?" "Once," he said, in vague terms. He'd been troubled by Ralph's spending, but nothing definite. "Would you know if he had written a new one?" Raymond hesitated. "I suppose so. I handle most of his affairs." Poirot tilted his head. "Then it is curious, because no updated will has been found." Raymond stiffened slightly. "Perhaps he never followed through." "Perhaps," Poirot said. "But if he had," Raymond added quickly, "I would have filed it." Poirot offered a faint smile. "Of course." Miss Russell followed. She entered quietly, composed as ever. "Miss Russell," Poirot began, "you are familiar with the estate and its staff?" "Intimately," she said. "Has Parker ever struck you as dishonest?" "No." "And yourself? Were you fond of Mr. Ackroyd?" She paused. "I respected him. He was not easy, but he was fair." Poirot nodded. "And Ralph Patten?" There was a flash of something in her eyes, quickly hidden. "He was impulsive." Poirot let the silence hang, then leaned in. "Did you ever have words with him?" "No," she said flatly. But Poirot's expression did not change. "Merci," he said. "You have been very helpful." Once alone, I turned to Poirot. "You noticed it, didn't you?" I said. He nodded. She lied. "About Ralph?" "Oh, there was something between them. Perhaps nothing scandalous, but something hidden. Something she fears will come to light." I exhaled. "Everyone has secrets." "Ah," Poirot said, rising. "But not everyone is a murderer." The next morning brought a surprise. Flora Ackroyd arrived at my house, breathless. "Doctor," she said, I must speak with M. Poirot. I brought her into the study. Poirot appeared shortly, his moustache freshly waxed, his suit immaculate. Flora stood straight. I have something to say, she began. Something I should have said before. Poirot gestured for her to sit. Go on, mademoiselle. I lied, she said. That night, I didn't see Uncle after dinner. I said I did, but I didn't. Poirot said nothing. I only said it to protect Ralph, because I thought if he wasn't seen, they'd blame him. But now I can't keep it in. Poirot smiled gently. You are brave, mademoiselle. But it means no one saw him, she said. Not after 3. Yes, Poirot said. That changes much. She looked at him. Do you believe he did it? I believe, Poirot said, that when someone tells the truth, a new light shines on everything. She looked relieved, but confused. And that, with Poirot, is always dangerous. After she left, Poirot turned to me. You see, one confession, and the entire story moves. I nodded. You knew she was lying. I suspected, but it is better when the truth comes unforced. So what now? Now, he said, we draw the circle tighter. He opened his notebook and began a fresh page. At the top, he wrote, 1. Who had access to the dagger? 2. Who knew about the letter? 3. Who benefits from the death? 4. Who is lying? Still? And at the bottom, one name was written, not as a conclusion, but as a question. Ralph Patten. Chapter 7. The Will, the Weapon, the Web. In detective fiction, we often think the villain's greatest weapon is violence. But in life, and in Fernley Park, the real weapon is silence. By the 3rd day after Roger Ackroyd's death, the silence inside the estate had grown thick. No new clues had been discovered. No sign of Ralph Patten. No letter. No confession. And yet, Hercule Poirot was smiling. Doctor, he said to me that morning, we are very near the heart of this matter. I raised an eyebrow, even with so many questions still unanswered. Especially because of that, he replied. Our first stop that day was the study, again. Poirot walked in slowly, scanning the room as if he'd never seen it before. He moved to the dagger cabinet, then to the French window, and finally, to the wastepaper basket. He turned to Parker, who had just entered. Monsieur, he said gently, has this been emptied since the night of the murder? No, sir, Parker replied. Inspector Davis requested it be left untouched. Poirot knelt beside it and removed a single torn envelope, unmarked, unsealed, but made of the same thick paper as Ackroyd's personal stationery. Interesting, Poirot murmured. You think it was part of the missing letter? I asked. Perhaps. Oh, perhaps. It is what someone hoped we would believe. He placed the envelope carefully in his coat pocket. Next, we spoke with Parker, this time, less politely. Poirot invited him to sit in the drawing room, which made the man visibly uncomfortable. You were in and out of the study that night? Poirot asked. Yes, sir. Only once or twice. I brought the message for the doctor. Let us be exact. Did you ever enter the room while Mr. Ackroyd was alone? No, sir. Not after dinner. Poirot leaned forward. You hesitated. Well, I may have stepped in briefly around 8:30. Mr. Ackroyd asked for his blue letter case. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Blue? Yes, sir. He kept important documents in it. Poirot and I exchanged a glance. And where is this case now? Poirot asked. I don't know, sir. You did not mention this before. No, sir. Why not? Parker fidgeted. I didn't think it was important. Poirot stood up. Everything is important, Monsieur Parker, even what you do not say. When Parker left, Poirot turned to me. You see, we are building a web, and in that web, someone is already tangled. He took out his notebook again and wrote 2 new lines. Blue letter case missing. Envelope torn and discarded. Then he underlined both twice. After lunch, we walked into the village, not to speak with suspects, but with gossipers. This, Poirot explained, is how we listen to the ground. We visited the post office first, when Mrs. Cray, the postmistress, welcomed us with bella-contained excitement. So dreadful, M. Poirot, and poor Mr. Patton, missing. Poirot smiled gently. Yes, but it is the small details that interest me. Tell me, have you seen anything unusual? Perhaps letters, visitors? Mrs. Cray leaned forward. Well, now that you mention it, 2 days before the murder, there was a special delivery from London. Private courier. Went straight to Mr. Ackroyd. A letter. A small packet. Poirot's eyebrows lifted. Merci. Next, we stopped at the chemist's shop, where Poirot inquired about poison, specifically veronal, the same drug Mrs. Ferrars had taken. The chemist confirmed that Mrs. Ferrars had purchased it herself, regularly, but in modest quantities. No suspicious orders. None that I noticed. Poirot nodded, thinking deeply. Outside, he said to me, let us suppose for a moment that Mrs. Ferrars was not only being blackmailed, but that someone feared what she might reveal. I stopped walking. You mean, the same person who killed Ackroyd might have driven her to suicide? Poirot looked up at the sky. I mean, mon ami, that we must not treat these two deaths as separate events. They are, how do you say, chapters in the same book. That evening, back at my house, we found Caroline in an unusual state. She was pacing the sitting room. I don't like this, she said. What don't you like? I asked. Flora. She's keeping something. I know it. Poirot smiled politely. Mademoiselle, your instincts are formidable. She blinked. You agree? I do. Caroline sat, clearly pleased. Poirot turned to me. Doctor, I will set a small trap. Not a dramatic one. Something gentle. I frowned. For whom? For whoever is listening. The trap came the next morning. Poirot made a visit to Fernley Park, claiming to return a book. But what he said, loudly, near the open study window, was this. It is very curious, Doctor. The fingerprints on the dagger are not Mr. Patton's, but someone else's entirely. A very clear set. In fact, very clear. Of course, there were no fingerprints. The handle was clean. But Poirot was not trying to state a fact. He was inviting a mistake. He returned to my home whistling. Now, he said, we wait. We did not wait long. That afternoon, Parker arrived, pale and agitated. I thought I should say something, sir. He began. There was a visitor. The night of the murder. Poirot raised an eyebrow. A man. I didn't see his face clearly. He came from the garden. Slipped in through the French window. I thought perhaps he was expected. Poirot said nothing. I didn't mention it before. I wasn't sure. Poirot smiled faintly. And now, you are sure? Parker looked down. Yes, sir. Poirot thanked him, then waited until he left. Then he looked at me. You see, the lie reveals the liar. There was no man in the garden. But someone is afraid that the fingerprints, which do not exist, will expose them. I exhaled. You're narrowing in. I always narrow in, he said. That is how you find the center of the web. Chapter 8. The Shadow in the Garden. In every great mystery, there comes a moment when the atmosphere changes, subtly, but completely. The innocent begin to feel afraid. The liar starts to sweat. And the murderer, sensing the noose tightening, begins to move again. That moment arrived at Fernley Park on the 4th day after Roger Ackroyd's death. Poirot met me early, as always. He was in high spirits, pacing my garden path with purpose. Today, he said, we begin to peel the rind. What remains beneath will be bitter. I joined him, coffee in hand. Have you decided who did it? I asked. He smiled. None, but I have decided who did not. And that, my friend, is just as important. Our first call that morning was with Major Blunt. We found him seated near the fernery, smoking a pipe. He looked up without expression as we approached. "Major," Poirot began, "you do not like talk, I think." "Don't see the need for it," Blunt said. Poirot nodded. "Then I will speak simply." He paused. "Did you love Miss Flora Ackroyd?" There was a long silence. Major Blunt did not move. At last, he said, "Yes." Poirot inclined his head. "You never told her?" "No." "Did Mr. Ackroyd know?" "Possibly. I never said anything." Poirot stepped back. "You are an honorable man, Major. But love, it can make men do foolish things." Blunt stood. "If you are asking whether I killed Roger, the answer is no." "I believe you," said Poirot. "But now I understand something more about the night of his death." He turned away. Major Blunt sat back down and said nothing. From there, we walked to the rose garden, where Poirot stopped suddenly. "There," he said, pointing. Near the path, just beneath the edge of a hedge, something pale stuck out from the earth. I bent down and pulled it free. A woman's glove, slightly soiled, size small. Poirot took it delicately and examined the lining. "Embossed initials," he murmured. "F.A. Flora Ackroyd. What do you think it means?" I asked. Poirot smiled faintly. "That the garden has been talking. We must listen." Back inside, we requested another word with Miss Russell. She was, as always, composed. "Miss Russell," Poirot said, "have you ever heard of the drug Veronal?" Her eyes flicked up, just briefly. "Yes," she said. "It's a sedative. You know it was the cause of Mrs. Ferrers's death." "Yes." Poirot smiled. "Then you will not be surprised when I tell you that someone in this house had access to it." She said nothing. "And perhaps," Poirot continued, "someone in this house was very interested in its effects." Still, she remained still. "Do you know who?" he asked. "No." But Poirot had seen enough. He thanked her and turned away. When we were alone, I said, "You're pushing her." "She is hiding something," Poirot said. "But not what we think. There is fear in her eyes, not guilt." That afternoon, Poirot sat at the center of the drawing room with a pad of paper. He asked the entire household to remain within call, but did not say why. Instead, he asked questions of time. When was dinner served? When did the coffee arrive? Who wound the drawing room clock? When was the last time the cabinet was dusted? There were strange questions, and they unsettled everyone. But Poirot was not looking for facts. He was looking for contradictions. The breakthrough came not with a confession, but with a sound. While pacing the study, Poirot knocked lightly against the baseboard below the window. A hollow thump. He looked at me. "May I borrow your penknife?" I handed it to him. With care, he pried up a section of the board. Inside was a space just wide enough to conceal a small folded document. He removed it slowly. It was the missing will. It was dated the day before Ackroyd's death. And in it, Ralph Patten was disinherited. His entire inheritance redirected to Flora. Poirot read it aloud. The room had gone still. So now, two new truths emerged. Ralph Patten had motive. Flora Ackroyd had benefit. After the household had gone to their rooms, Poirot sat with me in the quiet drawing room. "I do not believe Ralph killed his stepfather," he said. "But someone wants us to." I asked, "Is that why the will was hidden?" "Perhaps." "Oh, perhaps," he said. "It was hidden to protect someone." We sat in silence. Then Poirot looked up. "They have made a mistake," he said softly. "A small one, but fatal." I leaned forward. "What was it?" He tapped his temple. "I know, but not yet. Tomorrow, we summon everyone." Chapter 9. The Little Gray Cells at Work. It was a still morning. The kind of morning where the birds don't sing, and even the wind seems hesitant. The villagers of King's Abbot went about their business a little slower, glancing toward Fernley Park more often than usual. Inside the great house, the tension was rising. Because Hercule Poirot had summoned everyone. Not just the family, not just the servants, everyone who had been in the house the night Roger Ackroyd died. They gathered in the drawing room. No one knew exactly why, but they came. Flora Ackroyd sat near the fireplace, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Geoffrey Raymond stood near the French window, looking out but seeing nothing. Major Blunt leaned against the mantel, pipe in hand but unlit. Miss Russell stood stiffly by the bookcase, expression unreadable. Parker, upright as always, lingered near the door. Poirot entered last, moving with quiet confidence, his shoes polished, his eyes gleaming. I followed behind him. "Miss Amos," Poirot began, "thank you for coming. I have asked you here not to accuse, but to arrange." A murmur rippled through the room. Poirot raised a hand. "You see, there are many threads in this case. Lies, omissions, secrets. But now, we shall place them in order." He moved to the center of the room. "Let us start with the motor weapon, the dagger from the display case." He turned to Parker. "It was last cleaned 3 days before the crime." "Yes, sir." "And it had not been touched since?" "No, sir." Poirot turned. "Then why, I ask, were there no fingerprints on it?" The room held its breath. "Someone cleaned it after using it," he continued. "Why? Because they panicked. A crime of fear, not premeditation." He turned to Miss Russell. "You are a woman of observation, and yet, you said nothing of the missing dagger." She met his gaze calmly. "I didn't notice." "Ah," Poirot said, "but you noticed everything else." A beat of silence. "Because you were afraid," he added. Still, she said nothing. Poirot moved again. "And then we have the blue letter case. Parker, you said Mr. Ackroyd asked for it." "Yes, but it was never found." Poirot turned to Flora. "You claimed to have seen your uncle after dinner, but you later admitted you had not." "Yes," she whispered. "While I wanted to protect Ralph." "Why would you need to?" She looked away. Poirot nodded. "And that brings us to Monsieur Ralph Patten. Missing, unreachable, and, according to the newly discovered will, disinherited." He held up the document. "This was hidden. Why? To frame Ralph, or to protect him?" No one answered. Poirot went on. "But what if I told you Ralph Patten has not disappeared?" Everyone turned. Poirot let the silence build, then smiled faintly. "He is in a nursing home in Cranchester, under a false name, recovering from a nervous breakdown. I visited him yesterday." Gasps broke out. He did not know Ackroyd was dead. He had fled out of shame, not guilt. Flora stood. "Then he's innocent." Poirot nodded. "He is." The room seemed to breathe again, but Poirot was not finished. "There is more." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, delicate item, a gold wedding band. "I found this," he said, "in the ashtray of Ackroyd's bedroom." Everyone stared. Poirot turned slowly. "Miss Russell, it is yours, yes." She froze. "It is not wrong to have a past," Poirot said gently, "only to hide it." Miss Russell finally spoke, her voice low. "I was once married. Briefly. I never told anyone. I feared it would ruin my position." Poirot nodded. "And did Ralph Patten know?" She looked shocked. "No." Poirot smiled. "Then you see, we are discovering much. But still, we have not reached the center." He walked to the mantel and turned to the room. "One person in this house knows exactly what happened, because they were in the study that night, after Dr. Shepard left." He paused. "And I know who it is." Everyone stared. "But not today," Poirot said. "Tomorrow, at noon, I will reveal the name." "Why not now?" asked Raymond. "Because," Poirot said quietly, "I will give them this one chance. One night. To confess." He turned to me. "Doctor, you will join me in my home, yes?" "Of course." "Good," Poirot said, his eyes bright. "Because tomorrow, the game is over." Chapter 10. The Last Night of Silence. The house at Fernley Park felt heavier that evening, heavier than it had the night of the murder, not because of death, but because of anticipation. For 4 days, suspicion had slithered from room to room like smoke. Now, it had settled, because Poirot had announced, plainly, calmly, that he knew the murderer's name, and he had given them one last night to confess. That evening, I joined Poirot in his small but perfectly ordered cottage on the edge of the village. The lights were low. A fire crackled. On the table between us sat a single envelope, unsealed, but folded crisply. Poirot gestured for me to sit. "Mon ami," he said softly, "tonight we review everything. Not for me, for you. So that when I name the killer tomorrow, you will not be surprised." I leaned in. He opened his notebook and laid it flat. "Let us begin," he said, "with what we know. 1. Mrs. Ferrars died of veronal suicide. 2. She told Ackroyd she was being blackmailed. 3. That night, Ackroyd received a letter naming the blackmailer. 4. Before he could read it aloud, he was murdered." Poirot looked at me. "Yes." I nodded. "Agreed. Now," he said, "the suspects." He listed them. Flora Ackroyd claimed to have seen her uncle alive after dinner, but lied. Beneficiary of the new will. Major Blunt, secretly in love with Flora. No clear motive. Geoffrey Raymond knew of the old will. Stood to gain nothing, but knew much. Miss Russell, secretive past. Knew of veronal. Possibly blackmailed herself. Parker, ambitious. Knew of the blackmail letter. Ralph Patton, disinherited. Disappeared. Poirot looked up. "Now," he said, "the question is not just who could have done it, but who had the knife." He leaned back in his chair. "You see, Doctor, murder is not a physical act alone. It is a mental one. You must be willing to destroy not only a life, but the lie that your life has become afterward." He tapped the envelope. "I wrote the name here," he said. "Sealed it just in case." I frowned. "In case of what?" Poirot smiled. "Suppose something happens to me tonight. The murderer may be desperate. They may think one death will cover another." I stiffened. "You think you're in danger?" Poirot shrugged. "Perhaps, but I have done what I must." He stood, hands behind his back. "There is one detail," he said, "that gave the murderer away." "What was it?" He turned to the fireplace. "When I asked about the telephone call, the one that summoned you from the study." "Yes." "You were told it came from the house, but the caller never gave a name." I nodded. "And yet," Poirot said, "you did not question it." I blinked. "No, I suppose I didn't. Because it made sense. It fit." He turned to me. "But the murderer made that call. They created the moment of opportunity. They relied on your obedience." He picked up the envelope, and that is how I knew. He placed it in the desk drawer and locked it. "Tomorrow," he said, "we meet at noon. Everyone will be there. You will read this, if I do not." I looked at him, uneasy. "You believe the killer may strike again?" "I believe," he said gently, "that a cornered rat is dangerous." He smiled, but his eyes were serious. "Bourne knew it, mon ami." That night, I barely slept. I kept picturing the letter, the dagger, the look on Roger Ackroyd's face, and Poirot, sitting alone in that quiet cottage, waiting for someone to crack, or to kill. Chapter 11. The Murderer Revealed. At precisely noon, the drawing room of Fernley Park was filled, not with casual conversation or forced politeness, but with tension so thick it seemed to silence the very ticking of the grandfather clock. Flora sat with folded hands, her eyes cast down. Major Blunt stood by the window, jaw tight. Geoffrey Raymond held his arms behind his back, expression unreadable. Miss Russell sat near the fire, lips pursed but silent. Parker stood discreetly by the door, and Hercule Poirot sat at the center, as calm as a man having tea. I was beside him, the envelope in my coat pocket, just in case. Poirot began quietly. "Miss Amos," he said, "I have assembled you here because the time has come to lay bare the truth." He folded his hands. "This case is not just a puzzle of opportunity and motive. It is a study in fear, in shame, and in one fatal mistake." No one moved. Poirot rose and walked slowly across the room. "Let us revisit that night, moment by moment." He raised one finger. At 9 p.m., Dr. Shepherd arrived. He spoke with Mr. Ackroyd in the study. He turned to me. I nodded. At 9:10, a telephone call summoned him home. Or so it seemed. Poirot paused. But that call never happened. It was a ruse. A clever trick to draw the good doctor away, just long enough for the killer to strike. Gasps stirred. Poirot's voice grew firmer. "You see, someone knew Ackroyd would be alone. They knew a letter had arrived, a letter revealing their crime. And they acted." He walked back toward the hearth. "Everyone in this room had secrets, motives, but only one had the nerve, the opportunity, and the knowledge." He stopped. "The murderer is." He turned, not to Parker or Flora or Blunt. He turned to me. "Dr. James Shepherd." The room erupted in disbelief. Flora stood, aghast. Raymond stared. Miss Russell's eyes widened. Parker took a step forward, then stopped. I said nothing. Poirot remained still. "You are clever, Doctor. Very clever. You arrived that night under the guise of concern. You spoke with Ackroyd. You saw the letter, and when he turned his back, he mimed a swift thrust. You took the dagger from the cabinet and killed him." I stood, trying to speak, but Poirot raised a hand. "You told us you left because of a telephone call, but the call came from your own home. Your sister never made it. You called the exchange ahead of time, staged it, then used your key to slip back in through the French window. You killed Ackroyd. You cleaned the handle. You left the letter half-burned, just enough to hide your name." He stepped forward. "But you made mistakes." He ticked them off. "1. The dictaphone." A murmur. "Yes," Poirot continued. "You placed a dictaphone behind the chair, set it to play later, to create the illusion that Ackroyd was still alive when Parker passed by. 2. The timing. You returned home suspiciously quickly. And the phone call. No one heard it. No record. It was a ghost. 3. The psychology. You inserted yourself into every part of the case. Offered to assist me. Always nearby. Always helpful." Poirot's voice softened. "I have known since the second day, but I had to be sure." He turned to the others. "You see, Dr. Shepherd was the blackmailer. Mrs. Ferris confided in Ackroyd. Shepherd panicked. When she died, and the letter arrived, he saw his ruin, and acted." Poirot looked at me. "You are not evil, Doctor, but you were desperate. And pride is a dangerous thing." The silence that followed was total. I stood still, unable to move. Poirot approached and placed something in my hand. The envelope. "I did not give this to the police," he said softly. "Not yet. You have this one night, to do what is right." Then he turned away. That evening, I returned home. I sat in my study. I thought of Caroline, cheerful, nosy Caroline, who must never know. And then, I began to write. Not to defend myself. There is no defense. Only to explain. This is not a letter of defense. This is a confession. I write it here, at my desk, under the amber glow of the study lamp, in the very room where I once believed I was safe, from discovery, from memory, from consequence. But Hercule Poirot has destroyed that illusion. It began, as many crimes do, with something small. A moment. A weakness. When Mrs. Ferris told me she had poisoned her husband, I saw in her shame a terrible opportunity. I became her confessor and her tormentor. I hinted. I pressed. I threatened. And she paid. Week by week, envelope by envelope, until she could no longer bear it. The day she died, I believed the past had died with her. But I underestimated two people. Roger Ackroyd, and Hercule Poirot. Ackroyd's strength was his conscience. Once she was gone, he couldn't let the matter rest. He needed to know who had broken her, who had blackmailed her. She had written it in a letter, and she had posted it. I had only one chance, one moment. When Ackroyd asked me to stay late, I brought my medical bag, and in it, the smallest weapon I could find, a pair of surgical gloves and a practice lie. I listened to him read aloud. I watched his fingers unfold the letter, and when he reached the name, my name, I acted. Quick, clean. I took the dagger from the cabinet. I drove it deep. I burned part of the letter, hid the rest. I left nothing behind, or so I believed. You may ask, did I feel guilt? At first, no, only fear. I crafted my alibi like a surgeon suturing skin. I staged the call. I hurried home. I told the story twice, once to the police and once to myself. And soon, I began to believe it. But Poirot, he sees beneath stories. He watched. He waited. He listened. He saw that my helpfulness was a mask, that my observations were too polished, that I fit too well. He was patient, and then he moved. And now, here I am. Why do I write this? Not to be forgiven. I have no illusions about that. But I have lived long enough beside truth to know it deserves a voice, even from a liar. I want Caroline to remember me not as a villain, but as her brother, flawed, vain, but still human. She must never know. Poirot promised me that. And in that final gift, I see not pity, but justice. To Ralph, Patton, and Flora, I am sorry. I used your fears. I stood by while suspicion poisoned your lives. But now, you are free. May you build something better from the ruin I leave behind. And to Hercule Poirot, mon cher detective, you are the finest mind I have ever known. You defeated me without rage, without pride, only logic and compassion. That is what makes you great. It is late now. I have prepared what I must. By the time this letter is read, I will be gone, by my own hand, as she was. The same drug, the same silence. Let the curtain fall with dignity. Let Poirot have his peace. And let this house, this story, be closed. Forever. And so, the case draws to a close. But the echoes of the murder of Roger Ackroyd may still linger in your mind. What did you make of Poirot's final revelation? Were you one of the few who guessed the truth? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to know where the story led you. If this mystery kept you company tonight, please like, share, and subscribe to Moonlight Audiobook. It helps our storytelling circle grow and ensures you won't miss the next tale waiting in the shadows. Until next time, keep your tea warm, your lights low, and your curiosity wide awake.